Back once again for the renegade master. 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 Back once again for the renegade master.
Hello my renegades and welcome back, and what are we getting back into? We are getting into Agatha All Along. We are now on episode 4, If I Can't Reach You, Let My Song Teach You. So we're literally going to be going back onto our Witch's Road with the people them to find out which is their next trial. But before we get into this, as I always ask, please hit that subscribe button, please hit that notification button so when you know I'm on and doing videos. Please comment, like, share and do all the good things that you do, because I am on the road to 1k. Anyway, when we get into this episode, I literally just had a thought of, with Sharon dead, aka Mrs. Davies, aka Mrs. Hart, how will they get her body back to, you know, the realm above? And 2, how will they meet the requirements of the last trial, given that each trial plays to each of the witches' strengths? Anywho, I thought that question may more than well be answered as the story gets told. Or was it an intentional death to allow for someone that should have been there in the beginning to come through? And thus we get to learn a little bit more about Agatha and our Rio. Anyway, so you see Teen basically digging a grave for Sharon, and Agatha is sitting over her stating that she didn't think Sharon had it in her. So Teen asks her what she meant by that, and Agatha just winks at her. So Lilia and Jen are talking about Sharon, and Lilia mentioned, for all we knew, her mother died on the road too. I really don't honestly think that Sharon, aka Mrs. Davies, aka Mrs. Hart, had any type of witch background in her at the end of the day, as again she's literally just a scapegoat from the person that Agatha was supposed to have asked but didn't. So Alice shares her mother did die on the road, so it was odds that her vision showed her mother taking poison. So I don't know what the connection is there, but if anybody does know, they can kindly let me know in the comments. So Lilia says basically we do not know that for sure, as in knowing that Lorna Wu actually did die on the Witch's Road and that she could possibly still be out there. But Alice disputes this and says she then died in a hotel fire. I think that Alice wants that to be true, because I don't think she necessarily believes that her mother was on the Witch's Road for something, because Alice basically blames herself for everything that is going on at this moment in time. Alice literally blames herself and doesn't want to believe that there's this type of curse or certain situations going on that she has no answers for right about now. She blames herself in the fact that she weren't able to, as she sees it, save her mother. So it is literally Jen with the questions. She does ask the right questions though, to be fair. So Jen basically asks Alice, if she's not finding her mother, why did she come? And Alice told them that her mother said the road would save her, as in Alice. So Agatha really don't have a damn heart at all. All she's worried about is getting on to the next task. She wants to get to the end to be able to get her powers back. That's all Agatha at this moment is looking towards. So she basically says R.I.P. Mrs. Hart and walks off, flapping her coat behind her for the rest of them to actually follow her. So Agatha is kind of heartless in some ways, and she doesn't necessarily play nice, but I think that's because she's had a lot of shit to deal with in her own life basically, and she hasn't got the time or the patience to cater to somebody else. She does admit that Mrs. Hart was a bad draft pick, and I'm like, you think, Agatha, you think? Because she knew that she knew that she shouldn't have picked her at all, basically, like at all. So Agatha basically saw it as a power grab, because basically she thought now that Mrs. Hart has died, basically she's saying there's more power for the rest of them. But what Agatha needed to realise is that the other witches, including Teen, are not like her. They are not so dark and heartless that they would do anything contrary to Agatha, because they don't necessarily trust her that fully. But I do think there's like a little kind of like kind of hate situation going on between all of them, because they're thrust together on this journey. And I mean, all you have to see is look at how Agatha was there for Jen in the moment that she needed her, in the moment that she needed someone to recognise her, Jen, for the witch that she was. Agatha was there for her and bolstering her along, which gave her the confidence to do what she needed to do to get them out of that trial. So there you have it. So then Jen does raise the issue, as I did in the beginning, about them having an incomplete coven. But Agatha basically sets her straight and basically says, as part of the ballad, it said, burn and brew with coven two and glory shall be thine. So basically what she's trying to say is they only needed a full coven to access the road but not get to the end. Jen does begin to tell Agatha that actually the true wording of the song, but Agatha is adamant it says coven two, because Agatha is basically saying that she was the student of the ballad, so basically she should know what the ballad says. Okay. But we shall see if she's right or wrong when it comes to the final trial, and they don't have the last piece of the jigsaw, or so we thought. As Alice's mother penned and sang the ballad in her band, they ask Alice. Alice basically gets freaked out when Agatha answers one which was left on the witch's road with her last time. And I just kind of thought, okay, if they're gonna go by the Marvel comics, the only person who was left on the witch's road with her the last time was the Scarlet Witch, because she was with the Scarlet Witch in spirit, and it was the Scarlet Witch that brought her back from the spirit world. So I don't know if that is what she's referring to. So basically they all start to argue, as they do, about whose fault it was that got Mrs. Hart killed. However, Teen is right when he said it was everybody's fault. But I would have said, well, it started with Agatha, who manipulated her to get in that house in order to get her down the steps and into that realm in the first place, where she had no business being. So they get onto people being replaced, as they need a green witch, and of course theirs is dead. So Agatha does state that, you know what, they can summon a green witch basically. And I'm thinking, well, that wouldn't be out of the norm, because at the end of the day, as it said, the witch's road bends the reality of the rules. So what they couldn't do up top, they can do down below, basically. That's how I'm seeing how it goes. So of course Team would have a spell book on him. I mean, come on. So Lilia does warn that they have to be specific in the summoning of this witch. So they do stand in a line, and you see that they've got an outline of a body in the leaves that's on the path. And it's Agatha as the head witch who makes the chant from the book. So Agatha goes to finish the chant, and this is where you get wind where there's no wind, basically, and it gets stronger. So Agatha passes the book to Teen and begins to like spin her hands together around and around until the light goes out. So as Lilia says, the spells needs to take time to marinate. I'm like, why does a person where Mrs. Hart was buried begin to make its way out of the ground with a bang and clicking bones like the dead person, you know, when they come out and they're all just like, and their heads twisted. I was like, no, even Teens said the same thing. What I was thinking, did they turn Mrs. Hart into a freaking zombie? Because I thought if any type of zombie comes out of that ground, I'll be switching straight off, because I just don't do zombies. I don't do zombies at all. So it wasn't Mrs. Hart that came out of the ground. It was the original witch Agatha should have asked, but didn't. So it was Rio, and Rio is the witch that pretended to be the agent in the very first episode of Agatha All Along, and basically helped Agatha strip back in the second episode, and then tried to kill her in the freaking third episode, basically. So that is why Agatha didn't ask her to come, because Agatha hates her with a passion at this moment in time, but we haven't got to the crux of why Agatha hates her so much. So Agatha just does not like her at all. So let's just say that Rio is hella strange and funny. She's completely hella strange and funny. And I will say in between this, if you hear any snoring, it is my grandson in the background having his sleep at this moment in time, so I do apologise for that. So Teen goes after Agatha to try and talk about Rio, but Agatha won't say anything at all about this witch. The other three are either scared and impressed by her at the same time, but they are very wary of her, and that's because Rio is not like them at all, but Agatha knows her and hates her. So Agatha should have known this was going to happen. Agatha should have known that this is what the road was going to do. Once you summoned the witch that you were supposed to have summoned, she was going to come. So they get to another house in the woods, and basically straight away Alice says pass, because Alice knows this house basically, but each time Alice walks off down the road it leads her back to the house. So Alice at this point in this trial will have to face her demons. So the significance of this house is that Alice will have to step into her family's legacy, as now the trial will be about her and what she needs to do in order to save the coven at hand. Alice has a lot of trauma from her childhood and is seeking to find out what happened to her mother. So stepping into a past she doesn't want to face will be her greatest fear she will have to then overcome. So as they step through the door, they all change into 70s gear, and I ain't gonna lie, it looks good on them, to be fair. And you see Rio will not leave Agatha alone. So on the wall depicts all the ways in which the witches died. And this is what Lilia is looking at. However, she does get upset when she sees a specific depiction of the witch's death, as I believe this is what happened like when she was young and in Sicily at the time, where there was a second wave of witch executions. So Jen sees the demon masks on the wall, and one almost looks like absolutely real. You see the dark eyes behind it, but they disappear as she stares at it more. So you see Alice then start to look at old posters on the wall, and there is one of her mother hanging up, who's Lorna Wu in terms of the band and her name underneath. So Lilia gets that Lorna was trying to open the Witch's Road with her concerts, and that's why she made a version of the ballad for herself. Alice basically explained to Lilia that her mother's fans were her coven, and 2 years after the tour she sold her whole catalogue of work to keep the house that they lived in. So Lilia, if you remember, can see prophecies basically. So when she says them, she basically has no clue or no space and time that she's actually sharing them. So each time she says things to the people who are not there, she kind of does this to Alice, where she says, which is it? Am I wispy or am I kooky? So Alice does answer that she's a bit of both, and it brings Lilia to face her, and she says to Alice, don't, but that's all it is. So but then when Alice goes to question Lilia, Lilia is completely clueless as to why Alice is asking her don't what. So it is the belief that as a witch who had active powers, she may well blast Agatha in the further episodes to come to protect the others. And if that is true, then Alice may well lose her life, because to blast Agatha will drain that power from you, leaving you lifeless, and we have seen this happen. So it makes me wonder, when Rio says to Agatha no or not yet, this may be what she could be alluding to in further episodes along, but we'll just have to wait and see. So it cuts to Agatha going into the studio, and Rio follows her, basically asking her how the quest for power is going. But Rio is wanting to cause as much damage as she can. So Rio asks about Team, but Agatha doesn't tell her that he has a sigil on him. So basically Agatha is trying to convince Rio in order to have a truce with each other. So I kind of picked up on the vibes between Rio and Agatha, that they knew each other in the big biblical sense. That's the vibe that I was getting from them. So in the Marvel universe, it does depict that Rio Vidal and Agatha used to be lovers, basically, and there was deep betrayal from Rio that caused their fractions and for Agatha to hate her. It's basically felt that Rio may have had a hand in something happening to Agatha's son, but we shall see if they let the truth out, basically. So Agatha gets Rio to say what happens next. However, as Agatha is getting to Rio to talk about what she believes is going to happen next as they travel this road, Agatha presses the intercoms so the conversation can be heard by the other witches. I think Agatha wants to kind of cause a mutiny as Rio talks about killing the witches one by one and when they get to the end of the road and Agatha getting her power, and then Rio manages to get her body. So for witches that are killed, Rio takes bodies, basically. That's her job. That's what she does. So Agatha then outs her by saying, I'm not that witch anymore, as though she's protecting her coven. But I think she wanted the others to realise that Rio is not to be trusted, basically. And there's a reason why Agatha does not trust Rio in the slightest. So the others do get mad, and as they're all going towards Rio to say, what the hell, what do you mean by what you've just said? A record begins to play and it starts to spin backwards, because Teen ends up finding another clue where it says on the sleeve, play me. So as it's playing backwards, you can kind of hear a demonic voice coming through the speakers, which it then makes it painful for all the witches and needs to be shut off. So basically Agatha picks up the record player and smashes it to the floor, basically, and the music stops. So there is a demon in this segment, but we will wait to see what happens next, because we now know it's time for Alice to face her generational curse, basically. So Lilia then says, we've been cursed, and then the clock, or the metronome as they call it, starts kicking. So we know the ticking, I should say. So we know the trial has now begun. So I'm like, okay, so what's Alice going to do? Alice then starts to feel different. She starts to feel light. And then Lilia starts to scream because you can see smoke coming off and she starts to burn. So Alice uses a knife to do makes a protection spell with the circle, and the burning stops. So she carves this protective circle as she's chanting the spell around Lilia, and this helps Lilia. So now it looks like they're going to have to break this curse. Lilia says the only way to end this curse is to face it. So as she turns to Alice, I was like, Alice, you're up, my gal. Time to face your demon head on. So, as it said, don't forget that the road you take, when you take the witch's road to find what it is you most want, and for Alice, I believe it's to break the curse and let the trauma go. So then the next person which that starts burning is Jen. So Alice has to do the whole circle chant again to help her. So Jen and Lilia, basically, because Jen hasn't got the covering that Lilia has, you see like a burn come across her shoulder, and Lilia has the same one. So as they're showing these burns, this is when Alice gets this premonition of freaking doom, basically, across her face. And then you start to hear these wings and a screeching, and you find the curse is actually an entity, but you can't see it yet. And it's the fact that Rio is so unbothered by it all. This woman is sitting on the sofa, relaxing, reading a freaking paper, and she's saying, well, that's the curse, basically. So Alice realizes that as she pieces the records together that Agatha's broken, what this curse means to her, as it was her mother's recorded version of the ballad. So Agatha grabs Alice and basically says to her, it was you that brought the curse in with you. Alice basically said that she did not believe that it was real, which we already knew, and believed that all she had through her life was bad juju, and everything that she'd been getting in her life was her fault, which she already kind of worked out as time went on. The biggest one for Alice was she couldn't save her mum, and that's the biggest guilt that she's carrying around with her. So basically Alice thought the same burns that Jen and Lilia had was a birthmark, and convinced herself that it was a birthmark. So this is when Jen gets mad at Alice, and she's realizing that they're now, as I've already said, dealing with a generational curse. So it then ends up attacking Teen at one point and throws him through the studio glass. So I was kind of thinking, okay, they're going to need to be able to see this thing in order to defeat it, but the time is like literally ticking and no one seems to be bothered by this timer yet. I have noticed though that Agatha definitely really attached to Teen. There is something there, and he's attached to her somehow, but we don't know how. So because she worries about it when he does get hurt, as in the first trial she stopped him from taking the poison and took it herself. Now in this one, as Teen's throwing through a plate glass and he's lying on the floor, she runs through first but stands back and allows for Alice and the others to tend for him. So I think Agatha's scared to feel again. That's what I think. So Jen won't leave the circle at all. So they ask Agatha what the plan is, She says they have to play Lorna Rue's ballad, but Alice truly doesn't want to, but she's got to step up now. She's got to step and put herself to the forefront. So Alice asks, basically, what good would it do? But it's Teen that points out that Lorna's version is different. So Agatha does ask, what did Lorna want from the road? And if you remember in the last episode, Lorna, Alice's mother, shouted to Alice, I couldn't protect you. So she wished to protect Alice. So I think that's what Lorna was trying to get from the road. But I was like, what if she managed this in her song of the ballad, but needed the witches to sing it to bring it to fruition? As I say, Lorna placed a protection spell for Alice within that ballad. So when we go back to the episode, it was Rio who then shares what Lorna wanted most was to save her daughter. It was Agatha that then says to Alice that Alice should have burnt to crisp years ago, but she was still there alive. So what was it that her mother did for her? And as I've already previously said, Agatha works out that Lorna's ballad is a protection spell, and each time it was sung, although Alice hated to hear it, it continued to protect her. That was her mother's legacy for her. The hope is that if they all sang it now, it would protect them all basically and break the curse for Alice. But as I said, they needed to hurry the hell up because the curse kept on getting closer and closer. So they begin to get into positions to play the ballad that Alice's mom wrote basically. So you see, as Agatha goes to sing, she gets burned, but she tells them to keep playing. And it begins to work because as Alice is playing the piano and Agatha starts singing, Agatha starts to begin to get protected from the situation. I was like, I ain't gonna lie, I enjoyed this version of the ballad, you know. It's something I will play, to be fair. So you can see that the curse is angry and it starts to throw flames and starts to burn parts of the studio down. You see Teen bend and grimace and then realise he actually got hurt when he was thrown through that glass because he's literally got a shard of glass stuck in his side. But although he's really wounded, he didn't want anybody else to notice and he carried on playing basically. So Alice starts to sing the added part that her mother put in. And you begin to see a split screen with Alice on one side playing the piano and her mother's poster on the other as she's singing this verse. So then the cursed demon appears and Alice sees it, and I'm not sure if the others do at that point. And I'm like, right, now it's time for Alice to kill the curse that took her grandmother and her mother. So Alice basically says that she's ready to kill it. So you see Alice literally get into her pocket of her groove when she's at that piano. The curse literally flies over, digs its talons into her shoulders, and you can see it's burning her, but she continues until the curse is basically disintegrated to dust and they kill it. The metronome stops. The piano then lifts open for them to leave. And this is the time when you see Teen literally collapse to the floor. So Agatha at this point does rush to him and you can see him start to bleed out. So as they get him out, they sit him on a plinth and manage to take the glass out, and Agatha is distraught and she's literally asking them, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? So Lilia begins to say that he is strong and young, and Agatha cuts her ass with a don't. As in, don't go there. This boy is not going to die on my watch, basically. That's how attached Agatha is to this boy right now. So then she looks to Rio and tells Rio don't, because Rio is ready and waiting to collect her body. So Agatha is basically showing the rest of them how much she cares for this young boy. So she gets Jen to do a potion to save Teen. And basically Jen is saying that she needs water and moonlight, so they manage to get the water, and Jen just puts the bowl under the moonlight and starts chanting, and Lilia translates what Jen is chanting, and basically Lilia mentions the Three of Swords. So we know that the Three of Swords is usually a negative card basically, but can mean a situation didn't go as planned or symbolises the pain caused by words, actions or intentions. So it would be significant to this moment basically, wouldn't it? Because Teen's life hangs in the balance. But it does work though, and the injury does disappear as Jen pours it on him. And all the other witches basically tell her, look what you've done, Jennifer, look what you managed to do, to make her see that she is worthy and to stop doubting herself. She's a very powerful freaking witch at the end of the day, and she's literally, even though she can't wave her hands and get rid of what she needs to get rid of, because that's what it was, because she's bound, she's still using her craft in order to make the potions to do what she needs to do. So in essence, she hasn't necessarily lost her power. That's how I'm seeing it. So Agatha ends up watching over team while all the others are talking, and Jen explains to the other teams, to the other witches, that she's an 11th generation root worker and she was a midwife. She talks about being invited to a group of medical people in Boston to share her expertise, and then when she got there she realised it was a trap, and basically she's then explaining that she didn't know how this doctor managed to bind her without being magical himself. So Alice talks about when she stopped believing in everything her mother taught her, and Lilia tells Alice now that everything her mother did was for her, and it does make Alice sad, because at the end of the day she denied her legacy for so long. So Tim does wake up and he turns around and he does ask Agatha if she was the one that put the sigil on him, and Agatha says no, and I believe it to be true. Because Agatha had no powers and didn't appear to know Teen during the time that she had, to be fair. Agatha says a sigil does work on a witch that cast it as well, and Teen does ask if it can be lifted. Agatha tells him that sigils are destroyed, not lifted. So sigils are only destroyed when they're no longer needed. So it will be for Teen to get to a point when he can share his identity and the sigil will no longer be needed for him to do that. Right now he's masked for a reason. So Teen does then ask Agatha what happened to her son. And I was like, well, that's the quick and surefire way for you to end your bonding session with Agatha. Because Agatha stares at him and goes back to herself and walks away, basically. So as she walks over to the group, you see Lilia talking to the others. And I think she was basically saying, you know, we really hated each other before, but now. And then she ends up blanking out. And I think Lilia at that point did see something, but she didn't mention what she saw, because Jen brings her back and saying, what, Lilia? And Lilia responds with her. So this is it. So I think Lilia saw something, but we're not going to know probably until the next episode what she actually did see. So Agatha walks back to the group, as I said, and Agatha shows them basically her battle scars, because they wanted to look at battle scars. And one was a knitting needle to the elbow, and she asked them if they ever heard of the Daughters of Liberty, and they say no. And Agatha says exactly. So according to some sources, they were a group of women who fought for the independence of the colonies from Great Britain in the American Revolution. So they were around 1760s to the 1770s. However, in the Marvel universe, they adapted that significance by building a strong group of skilled women to protect freedom and justice across generations. So each of these women in the Marvel universe all had a varied skill set. Some were magical, and the group of magical women were actually mentored by Agatha. So there is reference within the episode, as you know, when she talks about the Daughters of Liberty. However, in the rest of the group, not hearing of the Daughters of Liberty, I've heard that this could be to Agatha is referencing to the ones before the list that has been set to date within the Marvel Universe, which includes Agent Carter, Princess Shuri, etc., could allude to Agatha wiping out those witches as to why no one had heard of them. So Rio basically says that she has a scar, and Agatha quickly points up and says, no, you don't. And Rio continues to explain her scar of loving someone who we all know is Agatha. And Rio had to do something she didn't want to do, but it was her job. And she continues with it, that the job she did hurt them, and this person is her scar. Now, I'm kind of thinking that the rumour surrounding Agatha sacrificing herself was a dark hold was wrong, and Rio may have had something to do with this and what happened to Agatha's son. Kind of hope we'll get the full story as time goes on. So Agatha ends up getting up and Rio ends up following her. Lilia grabs Rio and tells her, don't think for a second, I haven't forgotten what you said in that sound booth back there. So Rio ends up finding Agatha and Agatha hugs her. So as Agatha goes in to kiss Rio, Rio tells her the boy isn't hers. I believe she's talking about Teen. So Agatha steps back and you can see that she's hurt by the words that have been given, because I think Agatha has some kind of hope that Rio would be attached to her through her son, or Rio would be her son, come back to her. And this is why the sigil's been placed there, because she wouldn't know if that's correct or not. So you see Agatha just nod her head sadly, smile and walk away. I don't know why Rio would take that dream away from Agatha, but we know Rio is up to something. Anyway, that is where that episode ended. I'll be back with a new episode, which won't be until after Thursday, because that's when the new episodes come in. But as I always say, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that notification button so you know when I'm doing videos. Please comment, like, share, and do all the good things that you do, because I am on the road to 1K. And I'll see you all again soon. Peace out.